What's up, guys? Matt here with Project Unbroken. Before we get into today's content, a couple things. Please take a second, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave us a comment, hit us up in the emails. We always want you guys to know that this conversation is a two-way street. And even though you hear me talking a lot to you guys, these conversations are mainly driven from your comments, your questions, the unique situations you guys may find yourselves in, and where, we might be able to say what we've been through, or, how some of our experiences may help you out in some way, shape, or form. As you may have noticed over the last couple of days, we are going to be pumping out more content like this from here on out. I don't know if it's something about 2020 or COVID or whatever it is. I just feel like if we can drive this conversation from, your side of the screen and from our side of the screen, it's just going to be more helpful in general. I know that I've learned a lot from you guys and just the comments and questions that you answer for each other. The emails we get, it's been enlightening for me as well. So I think it's going to be good for everybody involved. That being said, you can now also get this same content in audio form on Apple iTunes and on Spotify. It's the podcast name is Project Unbroken. You'll see my big ugly mug on the logo. Right now, it's going to be the same content. I'm trying to, work on getting some guests on for conversations. But I know for me personally, I tend to get my content in audio form anyways when I'm driving or when I'm at work. It's just easier for me. If that's the case, subscribe, leave us a review if the content is any good or if you appreciate it. And we'll keep this thing moving. So speaking of conversations being driven by you guys, I want to make a video. I got a question from my guy, Jesse B, from overseas out in England. And Jesse's been supporting the channel for a long time. Much love, Jesse. He had a question on yesterday's video. I'll read it to you and then kind of go into my thoughts on it. Okay. Could you do something on what I'm struggling with at the moment? So for me, I'm clean, I train all the time, I'm a personal trainer, but lately I'm struggling with depression, motivation, and big time procrastinating. I can see self-sabotage things now that obviously in the past would have led to using. I have no intention or interest in using, but I am very aware of letting things slip and thinking, fuck it. Well, fuck it has always been the worst thing I could say in the past because I'd come so far with my work or my MMA, kickboxing, I was British world champion, then always fuck it up. Then rebuild, do well, then repeat. Almost like a cycle of self-sabotage. Almost like a cycle of self-sabotage. So I fully get when you talk about mixing up your training every 6 weeks. I do the same because I get bored with the same routine quickly. Have you ever struggled with any of this? And how or what do you recommend I do, please? Again, thanks for the question. Thanks for the continued support. Just nothing but love on this side. So a lot of our videos and a lot of the comments that we have received in the past have been more based on acute withdrawal symptoms, the physical pain of withdrawal. How bad is it going to hurt? How do I, not suffer so much through this? And those are valid questions. We've done a bunch of videos on them. And there's a lot of good information that we have put out there, how to make it a little bit easier. But to be honest, if you've been through the ringer, you know what that's all about. If you haven't experienced, those initial withdrawal symptoms, it's coming. Like, you got to pay the price. Certain things help. There's a lot of maintenance drugs that can make it really easy, especially if you play the taper right. Lots of good videos on that too. Our taper method is world renowned. Like, you can do it. It's not that bad. Jesse's question touches on some things that are really at the heart of the issue of why we started Project Unbroken. So issues like this are why we believe that people get to a certain point. You're in recovery. You're not using. You've got some time under your belt. You might have 5 years, 10 years, 15 years under your belt, but you can't seem to really find true happiness. You can't seem to get to that place where you're thriving, where you really feel good, where you're living the life you want to live. And, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think it's a lot to do with the, current recovery community at large. I think there's a lot of little things in there that psychologically make zero sense, and they, in my opinion, lead to a lot of self-sabotage and relapse situations. And I could touch on that. I could touch on that later. It'll probably come up in this conversation. But even if you just look at basic psychology and you look at how to kind of get to this next level, you got to put some deep work in here. And the tricky part is Jesse is kind of already ahead of the game a little bit because he is recognizing it. And that's the hardest thing to do, because, when we self-sabotage, it's very sneaky. It has a lot to do with self-image, self-esteem, self-talk. It has a lot to do with the way your subconscious views you as a person and the decisions that you make based off that image. And it's not easy. So, it's your own brain telling you to do something that's not good for you. That's the definition of self-sabotage, is you're getting in your own way. You're screwing up your own success, your own progress. So how do you put the brakes on that? Because you already know, if you saw somebody else doing this, you'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're making progress. Why are you fucking it all up? And it's because until you get the tools to manage it, you're not completely in control of steering the ship with these decisions. And the long and short of it is, it requires practice for, mindfulness and learning how to, like Jesse is doing, learning how to recognize these situations before you fuck them up. And it's not easy. There's work that needs to be done there, and I'll kind of get into what I think is helpful. But you have to first recognize that these situations aren't going to be completely obvious or clear at the start. And a lot of times you won't even know you're doing it until it's done, until the damage is done. Then you're like, fuck, what the fuck was I thinking? So how do you get control of your subconscious image of yourself? How do you get control of being able to recognize those thoughts before they turn into actions? And this kind of goes back to a few things that we've talked about in the past, these tools for mindfulness, meditation, hypnotism, et cetera. And I'll kind of go over some precise tools that will help you kind of gain control of this. So one thing that I like to think of when it comes to mindfulness and recognizing these situations or circumstances before we mess them up, or before we make a decision, based on an incorrect idea or assessment of what's actually happening, we need to start looking at the process of the decision making. So typically there's three pieces to this process. There's the stimulus, then there's the break, and then there is your reaction to the stimulus. So there's three parts there. The part that is typically missing, or sometimes basically non-existent, is the break. So this is, let's say you're driving and somebody just fucking cuts you off out of nowhere. You immediately get pissed off. It's the stimulus was somebody cutting you off. Your reaction is beeping your horn, screaming, getting worked up, whatever. The practice, the work that needs to be done, is recognizing the stimulus. So when something happens, somebody pisses you off, something stressful at work happens, whatever it may be. You need to recognize that first. Then you need to start to slow down or build up that break period. So you get cut off, you need to recognize, all right, I feel my heartbeat increasing. I feel my blood pressure rising. I feel the anger turning on. You need to sit with that for a second and then see what to do next. Think about, okay, now I have some response, like something's going to happen. I'm either going to fucking run into this guy, or I'm going to beat my horn, or I'm just going to, scream out the window or give him the finger, or I can just not really do anything. It's not, in the big scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. Like, is it worth me, potentially, running into this guy, or, pulling over and trying to get into a physical altercation with this guy, potentially, putting myself in a legal situation I don't want to be in, or do I just, let him go and go about my day? And whatever decision you happen to make, hopefully you make the right decision and just fucking don't worry about it, because it's not really a big deal. But I have gotten out of the car to fight people before. I've gotten in road rage altercations. I know what that's like. But your ability to recognize that stimulus and how, and have the time to figure out how you want to react to it, that is where the magic happens. And, this can be worked on, through meditation, where you kind of just, essentially sit and focus on your breathing and try not to let all the crazy outside noise and thoughts and, think about shit that you have coming up or something that you did 2 weeks ago. Just shutting all that out and just focus on your breathing. And when, a thought comes in, you just notice that thought. Like that thought of me saying something stupid when I was in 10th grade just came into my mind. I'm going to notice it and I'm going to let it go. It's going to pass. It's no big deal. And then you just focus on your breathing again. That is one way to kind of strengthen that muscle, so to speak. When it comes to, a slower situation, or not even slower, if it's a situation where, maybe stress is kind of gaining over time, and you start kind of slowly rationalizing the idea of like, maybe I should have a drink. I can, probably, control it this time. And it's a more slow process instead of, something as drastic as getting cut off or whatever. This can be even a more difficult situation to recognize, because you're having that kind of internal conversation with yourself, and there wasn't an obvious catalyst to the situation, or a stimulus, right? There wasn't an obvious stimulus like the guy cutting you off. This one, it could just be like you spilled your coffee in the morning, then somebody cut you off, then your boss was being a jerk, and the day just kind of starts to negatively spiral down, and you're like, you just start to fall into that pit. This is a different type of recognition. This is something that is just, death by 1,000 little pinpricks. And sometimes it's not quite as easy to see. So in this sort of circumstance, you need to be aware of your thoughts at large. So, when you start having this more kind of negative self-talk, you spill your coffee, you're like, oh, I'm so clumsy. Somebody cut you off. Oh, this guy's a fucking asshole. Your boss is being a jerk. All these things can kind of just pile up and, just get worse and worse and worse little by little. And next thing you know, you're making a decision because you're just kind of slowly fed up with shit. Now, a tool for something like this is a gratitude practice. That's one that has served me really well for these kind of more longer, drawn out scenarios. And that's because, you know, the way that when you're focused consistently on the things that you have in your life that you're grateful for, or that are positive, or that are like helping you out, the more you're going to frame any situation in a positive light. It's really difficult to be mad at somebody or to have fear in your heart, so to speak, when you're grateful. It's you know, according to some, it's impossible. So if you just force feed your brain with gratitude practices, you're going to put yourself in a much better position to, you know, laugh when you spill your coffee, or to just wave the guy over when he's trying to cut you off, or to, you know, find a better way to deal with your boss when he's being a jerk, or whatever it is. Because you're gonna look at the things you have in your life, and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm not concerned about this minor inconvenience, or, you know, this guy kind of being a jerk. In fact, you'll kind of look at him and start to feel sorry for them, and, you know, say like, oh, he's that way because he's not feeling good inside, or he's hurting inside. And you will start to frame every situation and circumstance from one of love and gratitude, as opposed to one from fear and anger. And that is really, really, really important. And, you know, in today's society, you just see way too much, or way too many people making decisions based off of what they think they're missing out on, or, you know, what they think they don't have, or how they got, you know, a bad hand dealt to them, whatever it is. And they are almost, that muscle has been strengthened so much because they're constantly looking for the negative outcome, or the person that's trying to screw them over, or, you know, whatever that is, that they're almost incapable of seeing all the great things they have in their life. And, you know, this is very clearly obvious when you look at, you know, different countries around the world, and you look at the income and the income levels, and you look at the happiness levels. I'll be very upfront in saying that America's happiness levels are bottom of the barrel. And we have everything. Like, you know, even, I'll say, most of us, if you're watching this, you're doing okay as far as, you know, where you stand in the world where finances are concerned. But finances don't mean shit when it comes to happiness. And that is where America has taken a really wrong turn in what we prioritize, and what we, you know, put on these pedestals as a society. And we look at, you know, how much money somebody has, or what kind of car somebody drives, and not how happy they are. And believe me, it doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you live in. You know, to a certain point, money will fix money problems and money stress, but it's not going to bring you happiness. If you're miserable without money, you're going to be miserable with money, and that's just the way it is. What needs to happen is there needs to be and if you're in that position, you know what I mean. If you have money and you're miserable, like, what next? Like, what? I thought that was going to fix it. If you find yourself looking at everything in a negative light, you know, these are the things you need to do to combat it. And you're not going to want to at first, because everything in your subconscious has wired together to say, like, this is how we look at the world. I'm a miserable Scrooge. You know, everybody's out to get me. I'm a victim. Da 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 da. Like, that is going to be your thought process. So when you hear me saying, like, oh, work on your gratitude, you're probably like, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You know. And I was that guy too. So that's why I know that's what you're thinking. But if you want to break that cycle, if you want to get out of that pattern, and you want to kind of just look at your life from an area of happiness, gratitude practices are going to bring you a long way. What else do we got? For Jesse's specific question, when he's asking about depression, procrastination, not wanting to move forward with things. I think all of this kind of circles back to the same mindfulness or the same mindfulness ideas or techniques. Get used to and normalize you checking in with yourself at a real level about how you feel and how you are thinking. It's not easy to have these conversations. Like, sometimes you have to have a hard look in the mirror and say, like, am I actually the problem here? Like, am I the one who is making things more difficult? And once you do that and you're honest with yourself, it can be a little bit easier to spot that behavior. And again, I'm not speaking specifically about Jesse. I don't know a lot of your day-to-day stuff. I'm more speaking from personal experience where I was in these situations, especially when I was kind of not using anymore, but still kind of stuck in this revolving door of, I was still getting into fights. I was still getting arrested. I was still, kind of in and out of the court system. At a certain, and I was always the victim. I was like, the judge sucked. My lawyer didn't give a shit. Like, it took me a long time to be like, oh, you're the one doing this, fucker. Like, you're the one who's making these terrible decisions and fucking yourself up moving forward. And, after a long, not even a lot of these discussions and situations of seeing, how these poor decisions affected my life in the short term, and honestly, like, how they've affected it in the long term, I had to start really kind of slowing down and thinking about my thought processes, thinking about my decision-making processes, starting to literally reshape my subconscious image of myself, who I was, what I wanted for my future, where I saw myself in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like, as a grandfather, as who knows how long I'm going to make it, but you have to plan for that long run, and you have to make those decisions, or you have to base your decisions off of that idea or off of that image. And I think if you keep that in mind, it can be really helpful. Some things for this, that can help with this are journaling. And again, like that self-hypnotism, guided meditation. Think about where you want to be. Think about what you look like, who you're with, what you're driving, how you're behaving, how happy you are, like what kind of physical shape are you in. Journaling about that stuff, like dream boards. Where do you want to live? What kind of house do you want to live in? Like, if you keep that stuff in your mind, if you keep yourself focused on that, you keep yourself focused on what you already do have and why you're grateful for the things that you do have, you start to build that distance between stimulus, and your reaction, and you build that time, that break in the middle, so you can make better decisions in the here and now based off of what you want and keeping what you're grateful for. Like, that's where the magic happens. And I know there's a lot of moving parts here, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, so bear with me, please. My mind wanders. But that's kind of the long and short of it. I think it's getting a good idea of who you want to be, how you want to behave, and then making small day-to-day decisions, giving yourself the space to make those decisions in a positive way to get you to that goal, long-term goal. And short-term goals are great. I know we're kind of talking about training in here a little bit. Jesse kind of sounds like he has his shit together as far as like the MMA and the physical training thing is concerned. And that has always been a big tool for Greg and I as far as recovery is concerned. And sounds like you got that down, dude. So keep that up, obviously. And change the goals up. Set short-term goals, long-term goals. Change up your training. Do what's good for you. But this is where the true battle is really fought. And again, Jesse, specifically to you, my hat's off to you recognizing self-sabotage as an issue And, even knowing that it's there, like that's half the battle. Once you notice it, start to think about it a little bit when you see these things coming. We start to pay attention to the signs of like, all right, like, this is a similar situation to when I, made that poor decision last time and kind of fucked up my progress. Try to see it coming. Try to make that decision-making process a little bit smoother. Focus on that, the stimulus and your reaction, and then make a decision that's going to be best for you. Like that's where we're at. And this stuff is going to build on itself. Every good decision we make is another brick in that wall to creating just the life that you want to live. Like the real thriving shit. Like the stuff that, that you dream about. That's where we want you guys to be. That's where we know you can be. We did it. You can do it. We can do it together. Like you guys, again, like I said in the beginning of this video, the comments, the questions, the concerns, you're helping me work through this stuff. Hopefully something that I say will resonate with you as well, but I think we got a good thing going here. So I'm going to leave it at that. Guys, thank you for watching. Please hit us up with questions, comments, concerns, share, like, subscribe. Look for us on Apple iTunes. Look for us on Spotify. And we'll keep the content coming. So thanks again for everything, guys. We love you very much. Look forward to talking to you soon. See ya.